Did you know that Emily is a very extraordinary and complicated person? Did you know that she started to speak with a fairly decent vocabulary at 7 months? She was speaking in full sentences at 10 months and singing songs. We didn't understand then how unusual our first child was. We also noticed that she virtually never moved. She sat, she didn't like to walk, so she was the talking head. And the surprise to us now is not that she became a writer, but that she became a yoga teacher.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Harvey's brother, Emily's uncle. My name is Uncle Blychey. That's important. I want to make a couple of random observations before I get to Emily and toast Emily and Jen. One is that many of you do not realize two things. First, the extraordinary gentleman who performed the wedding tonight is my old friend and Harvey's longtime friend, Judge Edward Corman. Judge Corman, who must be our friend because he has stayed around for several hours after the ceremony and that's the testimony. And I were in the Solicitor General's office a long time ago, and I got married a little bit before him and was invited to his wedding where I served as a ritual witness on his ketubah. And there he is tonight marrying my niece, and that's very significant, I think, and mystical for all of us. The other thing I want to point out is the remembrance tonight to my mother and father that I think I have to explain or else no one would recognize it. For 35 years, my mother and father, Emily's pop and Minu, to whom she was extremely, extremely attached, went twice a year to Italy for approximately a month in the fall and a month in the spring. They were obsessed with Italy, and with no place were they more obsessed than with Venice, and particularly with the Gritti Palace Hotel in Venice that had a terrace overlooking the Grand Canal in which they spent literally hundreds of hours. As we listened to the ceremony tonight and tried our best to hear the venerable and wise words of Judge Corman, motorboats went by on the Hudson River, and it sounded so much like the boats on the Grand Canal that I'm convinced that this was supposed to be a memorable occasion for my mother and my deceased father. Emily was the first grandchild born of my mother and father, even though Harvey was their third son. He beat us all to the punch, me by a lot. Some of that had to do with draft dodging during the Vietnam War, but we won't go into that. But I was incredibly relieved when Harvey mentioned Emily's precociousness and what she could do at 7 months and so on, and he didn't exaggerate in the slightest. I was incredibly relieved because our family has very mixed genes. There are lots of very dumb people in our family, and there's some very, very smart people, and my mother and father got all the right genes and imparted all the right genes to our 4 children. Emily, the first grandchild, and I realized almost instantly that she too got all those genes. She was really smart. She had dodged the bullet that all the rest of my mother's grandchildren dodged. And as she grew, Uncle Blychey, who was single then and single for quite a long time after that, I think I'm entitled to say, was a fairly major figure in her life. She and I bonded big time. They lived in Charlottesville, Virginia. I lived in Washington. They came to visit, and Emily said, I want to sleep in the bed with Uncle Blychey. And she did. And we had something incredibly special. And that lasted, and it lasted. Now, our lives, uncles, aunts, and so on, lives diverge. But she still comes up to me and says, Uncle Blychie, it's your little Chachi Emily. And I think that means that we're still kind of as bonded as we were when she was 3 or 4 years old. And I care very, very deeply about her. I really love her. I'd like to think that the fact that she wrote a book about being Jewish and Jewish,